side of the pond. He is DJ Schweitzer. I am Jeremy Lance. We come to you not in the same studio again. I made the great decision of getting a flu shot and a COVID booster today, and around like 8 p.m. I was like, wow, I'm all out of energy for the evening. I don't think I'm gonna be able to make a drive to your house late at night.
Yeah, good thing we agreed to record a full hour and a half after that point. So
yeah, I'm sort of surprised I've still made it this far and haven't just passed out on the couch.
All right, well, it's something to look forward to. Is Jeremy's
high energy
wandering off to sleep in the middle of the podcast, and who knows what words will come out of his mouth in the meantime. But
you'll just hear the mic just hit the ground here.
Yeah, it'll be loud and very noticeable. But we are reconvening tonight after a bit of a break from the international play, as we normally do. I mean, we'll be tackling men's national team stuff a little bit later on in the show. If you didn't know what happened, it didn't go all that well. It was not great. It didn't go horribly, but it did not go well.
I would say it strayed closer to horrible than it did well.
Sure.
If we're putting it on a spectrum.
Yeah.
A horrible spectrum.
I mean, that's a not great spectrum to be on in any kind of category, but yeah, definitely closer to horrible than to well. But overall, not a great break for the men's national team. But we are back also after the return of the Premier League, and what a weekend it was after an international break. Sometimes these things can be slow to slip into. This weekend was full of all sorts of interesting results and pretty marquee matches too.
Yeah, so this was kind of it's weird that they scheduled it this way, that they put both marquee derbies on the same weekend.
Yeah.
You would think they normally like to space them out and each kind of get their own big buildup as the match of the weekend, and everything leads to that, and it gets often that big Sunday afternoon billing of like the late Sunday match or the late Saturday match. Instead, we got both the North London derby and the Manchester derby just back to back.
Yeah, I mean, we do sometimes see some of these pairings up every once in a while.
But I mean, this is 1 and 1A as far as like derbies in the Premier League.
Yeah, in city derbies for sure, and I think it's one of those things where the schedule makers maybe saw it as advantageous to put them on the same weekend. Like, hey, the Premier League is really back and it gets people up and going. Maybe the Premier League's testing out their own like version of MLS rivalry week. Maybe next year we'll get both of these derbies and like Liverpool, Everton, a little,
I feel like that is missing from the big rivalries, the big derbies in the Premier League and really in world and global football, is like all the made up names that MLS had, like the Trillium Cup and all that stuff. Or if you even go to like college football and like all the goofy like trophies, quote unquote, that they play for in their rivalries, like Wisconsin and Minnesota playing for Paul Bunyan's axe. Like, we need crazy things like that.
I mean, in European soccer, you're saying? Like,
we need like the Manchester derby to be for like, some stool from like the oldest pub in Manchester, something ridiculous like that.
I mean, I would be cool with that. That would be pretty awesome. I feel like if you were to introduce that as an idea, it would probably go over about as well as the introduction of like, a Premier League All-Star game.
Yeah. But like the Merseyside derby, like they play for, I don't know, Paul McCartney's, guitar or something like that.
Yeah, sure. They just pass it back and forth over the years.
Yeah. And it's, the winner gets it at the end and they hold on to it until it's, claimed by the next team, All
right.
You get to hold on to it. I mean, listen, if we're trying to throw out Americanized quote unquote bad ideas, this is pretty tame stuff right here.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This all seems doable in the grand scheme of bad American ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like anyone's owners are calling and asking for goals to be enlarged quite yet.
No. Or like, what if we played with 2 balls? Or
Yeah,
what if we gave the goalie, like, blocker pads?
Yeah, or extensions for his arms.
Yeah. Just like big, like those, those big circles with the Velcro that you would like throw the ball and you could do like catch with.
Yeah.
Where you have like, you're just like just one of like just a giant disc thing that kind of is on like a shield that they could just swat the ball down with.
Hand gets like just a big, almost like a big giant foam hand.
Yeah.
Extends larger. It's kind of like a crab that has one pincher that's much larger than the other one. You'd have a goalkeeper and they just get you're allowed to have a giant hand prosthetic on your hands.
Just a giant Mickey Mouse hand. Or maybe just like even go like just a giant like like a giant fishing net that you just can like hold like almost like a lacrosse goalie.
Yeah. You could like lasso the ball in, catch it with a little swoop.
Yeah, you just swat it out of the air and
anyone with like a lot of fishing experience with a net might be, finding this pretty useful in that capacity.
Yeah, but Norwegian keepers will be in vogue.
Yeah, send us your further suggestions on really great American ways to change European soccer, because these are great. I could do this all night long.
I love it. But so we do have you're just delaying North London Derby. Let's get to it.
I got you a few minutes longer into this than I thought I was going to be able to. So at least this is a decent start to the night.
It didn't go well, bud. The North London Derby did not go well.
It went well if you were an Arsenal fan, which I am not. Recently started a new job and discovered one of the guys who sits pretty close to me on my division is a big Arsenal fan, and he greeted me with a printout of the Arsenal crest sitting on my desk this weekend. So thanks for that, Mike. I really appreciate that.
Did you go with the modern one or like the old school one?
It was the modern one. It was definitely the modern
all right.
one. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Fair play, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it was as friendly as it could be, But yeah, that was definitely not a result I enjoyed very much. And I think the one thing I think is totally worth saying is we've been talking all season about, Arsenal, great start. Do they deserve? Are they the best team in the league? Yada yada yada. But we've kind of questioned all along, like, hey, they've really not done really well when they've had a stern test. They only played Manchester United. It's kind of the only big team they've faced so far, and they really stumbled there. And Spurs was the next big opportunity for them to test themselves, and it's fair to say they passed that test with flying colors. And full credit to them. As bad as I don't enjoy, this type of admission, they were deserved winners in the match. And frankly, I feel like 3-1 was even probably a kind result.
So let's talk about Arsenal. I mean, I feel like we're kind of doing the like Leicester City style, like continual, is this for real temp check? But like clearly at this point, they are a team that is hitting their stride. They are playing to the height of what people were thinking was possible with this very young team. Do they have enough to keep this going all season? Because here's what we do know. We do know with limited exception, Manchester City are going to pretty much be right there keeping pace. And then they'll probably still have their weird games where they draw with like Southampton 0-0 or something bizarre. Right. But other than that, they are also moving quite well through the table. Does Arsenal have it within them to keep outrunning them?
I mean, you look at that Manchester City attack, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we'll be talking about City here shortly, but you look at it, and it just seems so formidable in a way that, while Arsenal are playing great, like I really don't want to take anything away from them. They are proving themselves to be a class above most everyone else they've faced in the league so far. But I can't imagine, especially when you get into those head-to-head matches against City, and they're gonna have to until really they get to that point. I think that's when we'll know how real this team actually is. Like, if they can stand up to that might, then I think it's time for us to like have that conversation and really say like, yeah, this is the team that is the undeniable best side in the league. But I until that point, it's going to remain an open debate. Like, there's really no way for us to say like, can they outrun City until I think they face City or they just fall off.
Sure. No, I get, yeah. I mean, I think you're right.
We're looking at those as, assuming that Arsenal can continue on in this vein of form. We're looking at those matchups against Manchester City as the 6 pointers that kind of decide who actually is going to take the title this season. So
right. And one of those was supposed to be here soon, but according to FOTMob, the Arsenal Manchester City match that was scheduled for Wednesday, October 19th has been crossed out as postponed. I don't see a new date for that yet. So at the moment, that'll get rescheduled at some point, but then the second matchup is not till the end of April.
I mean, that's forever from now.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking once that match is over, you got five matches left in the season.
So, that's a pretty stern late test for them. That may very well, if they can continue on like this, be the match that makes or breaks their season. But I mean, I'm not going to try to like dent this armor at all that they have and have rightfully earned at the moment, sitting at the top of the table from pretty much day one. But I will say that Spurs have not been playing that great. So was this the test they deserved? I don't know. I think Tottenham did okay to keep themselves in this match 1-1 at halftime. But Arsenal right now have proven like, hey, we can beat a top, and Spurs are arguably one of the top teams in the league this season as well.
Sure.
But I don't know. I think they have it within them to run for a while. I don't know that they have more legs than City, and I think City can run for quite a bit longer if necessary.
Yeah, you mentioned Spurs not playing particularly well. Even this season on the whole, as of right now, just because of like standing and where teams are, their best win in league is technically Fulham.
Yeah.
That's their best. That's the win that they have over the highest current rankings. The highest team they've beaten is Fulham.
To be fair, Fulham are in the top 10. So, I mean,
no, they are. It's top 10, but it is Fulham.
It's worth pointing out that simply because if I'm going to hold Arsenal to the standard of like, well, how have you performed when you've actually faced teams that are good? Unequivocally, you can say that Spurs have failed pretty much every opportunity at a chance to beat one of those top sides. And I'm going to include Chelsea in that. You guys are in that discussion, I think, and then starting to find your feet again a little bit now that you've got Graham in house for a little bit. But Spurs have not passed that test that I've held Arsenal to. And Arsenal, at least in the two meetings, have pulled away with a win. And Tottenham definitely don't have that in the top sides that they've faced so far.
You do play fellow top side Brighton this weekend, so a tough test awaits.
I mean, that's a bright side in the league so far this year, and even having lost Potter to Chelsea at a very inopportune time in the season, they're continuing to rip off good results, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit later, but that's a side that I'm not very confident about getting back on the right track about at this point in the season.
Arsenal will actually host Liverpool this weekend, so a big test for them. We'll see how they do, even though Liverpool is not playing particularly well at the moment. Still a big match, a non geographical derby, but a pretty big one, pretty historic one nonetheless.
Yeah, tons of history between those two sides over the years, fighting for at the top of the table, or at least for Champions League spots in the noughties. So Interesting set of matches still to come there. But yeah, big weekend away from not just the man. I feel like I'm really struggling here tonight. It wasn't just a big weekend because of the derby between Spurs and Arsenal. There was also the Manchester derby, which was just. I don't think anyone was expecting that type of result. I think there was the opportunity for there to be lots of goals, but this 9 goals, I think, was definitely a bit more than anyone was really anticipating.
Did this, we've seen already a roller coaster from Manchester United of a really poor start, and then they kind of been able to right the ship somewhat and play a lot better, and they actually have some legitimate marquee wins. They beat Arsenal, they beat Liverpool, but this match, on the whole, as far as just in general where these two clubs sit in football, just really shows that like City has sort of opened up a chasm between the two of them as far as where they're at.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The table each season has kind of proven that over the last.
Sure.
But this was definitely like one of those mile markers that you occasionally pass by that tells you just how big and how far the gap is between the two of them. And 6 goals, the 3 that United got were mostly in the last 10 minutes of the match. And they were consolations at best at that point in the game. But it's not just a gap anymore. It's like a sea, an ocean of space between these two sides. And it really is one of those things that every once in a while you have to pause and be like, rewind the clock back 15 years and be like, hey, which of the two Manchester clubs is going to be one of the most like breathtaking sides on the planet? Like 99.9% of everyone would have picked Manchester United. Like, yeah, City are this ambitious new owners, whatever. But they have turned a true corner, and maybe it's a bit of a sign of how far United have fallen too. But the City are just indomitably better now, and it's not even a question. They're not even worried about United being in the same stratosphere as them for a while, at least.
Also, the other part of this is speaking of putting some distance between themselves is Erling Haaland putting some distance between himself and every striker that has ever played in the Premier League.
Potentially the world. This guy is just we're running out of ways to describe him.
They were listing so he has a hat trick in this match. They were listing some of the people that he has more Premier League hat tricks in already. So he has more Premier League hat tricks 8 matches into his Premier League career than Ronaldo, than Drogba. I mean, like big names.
I mean, I have here the fastest 2-3 hat tricks, how many matches it took in Premier League history. Luis Suarez, it took 71 matches. Andy Cole took 65 matches. Fernando Torres, 64 matches. Ruud van Nistelrooy, 59. Michael Owen, 48. Erling Haaland, 8.
8 matches.
8 matches. Like if he carries on at this clip, essentially, he will have had 4 more hat tricks by the time he's had 48 matches under his belt, like Michael Owen had by the time he hit 3. That's just it's ridiculous. And you had mentioned Ronaldo. I think Alan Shearer only has 3 hat tricks, and he's the leading Premier League scorer of all time, and he only has 3. And here's Erling Haaland 8 matches into his career. I feel like we're getting to witness like the birth of greatness. Like we are just seeing someone who has been outstanding the last few years in every imaginable way of measuring their performances. And now we're just seeing someone that's turning the corner from like outstanding to like genre defying. And the next truly great player. Like we've been asking, like who is the next player who's going to carry the torch on now that Ronaldo and Messi are clearly, on the downside of their hills.
Right.
And there's been, some debate, well, it's Lewandowski or, maybe it's, this midfielder or that midfielder or whomever, like
Mbappe or Neymar. I mean, those were the names that people have
right?
tried to push forward in the past.
Yeah, you could maybe make an argument for someone like Kevin De Bruyne.
Sure.
And man, like I get the very clear impression that this kid's it. And our good buddy Adam Maloney described him this weekend to me as he's like the Monstars from like Space Jam, the Monstar version of Ibrahimovic. Like someone who's just capable of anything, like just anything's possible, but he's like bigger and meaner and like takes less prisoners than like even someone like Ibrahimovic would. And I felt like that's the perfect way of describing him. Like he even looks like he would be a monster. He's just like gargantuan.
He definitely he has the kind of the silhouette of one.
If he hadn't been a pro footballer player, like he would have almost certainly had to have been like an actor who played a henchman. Or he would have had to become an actual henchman. Like those are the only other options available to him.
He would definitely have been like one of the guys, one of like the rando bad guys in like the remake of Die Hard.
Oh yeah. Or you could see him being a baddie from, a James Bond movie.
Yeah, just some nondescript Scandinavian dude that's just
like the main dude who's the head henchman would like snap his fingers to like make something, to order something to happen, and giant ass Erling Haaland would walk out and pick up a crate of missile launchers or something. I don't know, like something that a normal human couldn't pick up. But you'd be like, whoa, look at that big like guy. I bet he could pick up that box, and he does. And that's what Erling Haaland would be doing if he wasn't smashing Premier League goal scoring records, because that's exactly what he looks like.
City win this, they win it going away. For them, it's keeping this pace, hoping to catch Arsenal. For United, just when you felt like it was one step forward, this match, it's hard to not. I mean, even though the talent that they went up against is just kind of at a level that they're not at right now, and we all knew that, definitely feels like one step back.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does. It's hard to not take a 6-3 loss as like a step backwards in any measurement.
Can't pull any positives from it.
I mean,
like with it though, like all of the Ronaldo drama feels like it kicked back up like right at the same time.
Well, I mean, Ronaldo played when they got their brains smashed in by Brentford earlier this season.
Right.
So I don't know that he's really moving the needle at this point. I think if anything,
sure, but all the stuff came out about how like, hey, they're definitely willing to move him in January and all that, and I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where that saga goes, because I feel like that Ten Hag can make some strides. He can get some pieces put in the right places, but as long as the Ronaldo cloud is like hovering over that club, I feel like there's always going to just be looming trouble and drama and disaster. Like they need to get out from under this.
They either need to get out from under him, or they need to get him to buy into kind of the same reduced type of role that he's kind of taken on with Portugal. And it's weird. Like he seems like the type of guy who in the club life he's demanding, and I'm sure he's that way for the national team as well, but he seems to be a little bit more deferential in that space. And it's like he's bought into the idea that, hey, I can sacrifice for my national team. And he doesn't seem to have that same willingness to do that, at least so far in his club life. But United can be willing to move him. The real question is like where he'd be willing to go. And can he get the amount of playing time that he's searching for? And I don't know if that answer exists at this point, but we'll have to wait and find out.
Let's whip around the league. Other matches, Chelsea get a late winner over Palace by 2021-2022 Crystal Palace Player of the Year, Conor Gallagher.
Yeah, that probably stung a bit for the Eagles.
Yeah, no, that I'm sure it did. Obviously a player that they were desperately hoping they were going to be able to have for another year of service, or possibly able to finagle an actual transfer for over the summer. Wasn't to be. He goes to Chelsea. He stays at Chelsea, and he ends up being the deciding factor as they get the 2-1 win in a match that, they got the 3 points. That's something to build off of. They had a great midweek here in the Champions League, but just not a convincing result. If you actually watched the match, Chelsea were not really in control at any point.
Well, hey, if you can get results when you play poorly, then maybe there's something to be said about that.
Also the other thing, so Chelsea and Liverpool both played over the weekend, and that was their first Premier League match in 4 weeks.
I mean, that's for an eternity in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
That's damn near a winter break in Germany.
Yep. Yeah. I think it was 27 days for Chelsea, 28 days for Liverpool, or maybe 28 and 29. Yeah. Well, but it had essentially been 4 weeks.
Well, if Chelsea were able to, shake off the rust and get a result that's better than what Liverpool managed, as they see a lead evaporate against this very up and coming and continuously surprising Brighton side, who just are.
It was a wild match. Like, Brighton took the lead early, then Liverpool stormed all the way back and took the lead, and then it was Brighton, snatching that draw and really showing their ability to hang in these tough matches against, a Liverpool side.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked earlier about how we've been asking the question of, like, Arsenal, are they kind of like Leicester? Can they continue on this way? I think Brighton's another team that we have to, like, ask that question of as well. And at the beginning of the year, we both questioned a little bit how they were going to perform and how they could continue this kind of upward trajectory that they've been on the last few years, with some of the departures that they've seen on the pitch. And now we've seen that happen on the touchlines as well with Potter. And yeah, I'm mega curious, like even more so than the Arsenal race at the top, to see if Brighton had the ability. Is this something that the club have built into themselves that was greater than just Potter? And it's increasingly seeming like it is.
And obviously there's two things going on here. There's Brighton showing their ability to play really well, to go up against any opponent. And as far as their place in the table at the moment, it's also a bit fortuitous that, the big six at the moment, by and large, aren't having great seasons.
Yeah.
Arsenal, City, great seasons. Spurs, a decent, okay season. Chelsea, an okay season. Manchester United, something season. Like Liverpool, I would say at this point, most Liverpool fans would consider this a pretty bad start to the season.
Yeah, I can't imagine this is meeting their expectations at all.
As they continue to drop points. So I mean, Brighton is seizing on this opportunity, in a way that you are playing well, but also it's at a time where most others aren't, and it'll be interesting to see how long they can kind of keep this up and stay in at the moment a Champions League spot.
So far, so good.
Other matches, Everton gets a solid win. They're just kind of quietly moving along.
Up to 11th in the table.
Yeah, Lampard's guys haven't really, they had a rough start to the season, and then it's been pretty smooth sailing, getting draws, getting points. obviously after last year, they understand that how important it is to get every point you can.
Yeah.
And scrapping these points here and there have been great. Getting these wins like they did on the weekend, it's huge. And obviously it all builds to them staying up. Speaking of staying, that would be one Brendan Rodgers, as his Foxes came flying out the gate against 19th place Nottingham Forest. I think they scored 3 goals in 10 minutes in the first half. They get the big win in a very, very way too early 6-pointer at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, it may very well still prove to be that way, but definitely the type of result that Rodgers needed with how hot his seat has undoubtedly become over the last couple months, as Leicester have just cratered from their previous highs from just a few seasons ago. But yeah, Forest looking increasingly like a side that is going to need every point they can get, and dropping some to a potential rival relegation candidate is not what they would have hoped for over the weekend.
Wolves lose 2-0 to West Ham. West Ham finally getting a clutch, crucial win, as they now have 2 wins on the season. Wolves with 1 win on the season, and now with 1 less manager.
Yeah,
as
Bruno
Lage, I don't know. He's gone.
He is gone. We don't have to worry about pronouncing it any longer, or at least in the near to short term. But yeah, the next managerial candidate, Wolves have been quite the inconsistent side this year, which is kind of disappointing. He had looked like a decent replacement for Nuno Espirito Santo at Wolves, but it did not work out. And West
Can they just bring him back?
Yeah, maybe they should.
What's Nuno doing? Did he get a job anywhere?
I'm not aware of him getting another job yet. He's probably still collecting a check from Spurs, I'd imagine.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I'd sit down and just get paid for that. That'd be pretty nice here and there. But yeah, West Ham also really needed that result, given how things have kind of gone for them to start the season off so far. So they find themselves in 15th place, which is still just 1 point above the drop zone, but it lifts them out of that conversation, at least for the time being.
By the way, your boy Nuno is currently managing in the Saudi Professional League.
Good for him. I'm sure that's
so. Sure, the pay is decent.
Yeah, decent pay, low expectations. Probably.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are there expectations?
Yeah. Barely.
Let's go stateside before we hit MLS. It's been a while since this has really all kind of gone down, and I feel like at this point it's a bit exhausted. The topic of the U.S. men's national team and their final 2 matches as they get set for the World Cup, which is just about a month and a half away, which is kind of a wild thing to think about.
Yeah.
They lose to Japan. They draw 0-0 with Saudi Arabia. Nuno wasn't managing that one. He's in the actual league. A very blah performance to end the run up to the road to Qatar. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, not just blah. It's like definitely a bit of a momentum killer for the men's national team, and they've really taken some bumps and bruises over the last few years, especially after failing to qualify for Russia. And this campaign, while it's not been the most smooth sailing all the way through, and the results that everyone would have wanted each time out, at least has given us some momentum and some kind of fuzzy, warm feelings about the men's national team here for the first time in quite some time. And this isn't the type of result you want necessarily going into a World Cup from a supporter perspective. I'm open to the idea that maybe Greg wasn't really that concerned about the outcomes if he was able to get the questions answered that he needed to have answered ahead of him making his final selections. But we won't know that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the question. I think the fan base has the questions they think still loom large.
Sure.
you're contending that possibly Greg has figured it out, come to terms with something on some of those. I think obviously the center back pairing is the one that maybe was the most glaring on that 2-match stretch as far as, hey, is this the 2 we're going with? Is this what we want to do?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those, like, I guess, are there other options on the table? It really makes you like question, and I understand we've been over this before, like Tim Ream, who's in just absolutely, fabulous form for Fulham at the moment, but has been completely out of favor within the men's national team setup since Greg came to the fore. So, tactically he's not a great fit, but do you leave a guy like that behind when the current center back pairing just isn't necessarily inspiring as much hope either? I don't know. I mean, these are the questions that he's having to answer, but I get the feeling that
John Brooks kind of is in the same camp of an older veteran guy that, he's still playing top flight European football. I believe he's at Benfica now.
Yeah.
Also a guy that seems to be very much not on good terms with Greg. Is there a chance that someone like that is brought in? Obviously, you hope. Was Chris Richards hurt? Was that his deal?
Yeah.
Was he hurt, or they just didn't choose to play? You figure he's going to factor in, right?
I mean, you would expect. I mean, but these are a lot of the questions that people were hoping that we get some sort of answers about. And no one's, obviously going to be told all of the health things that are going on with a particular player, all the time. But Chris Richards, was unavailable for selection. I think he would have been someone that Greg would have liked to have seen. But I think this camp, like I said earlier, like results may not have really been that important or that high on Berhalter's to-do list with these. And, given that we got to see a little bit of Pepe in the 11, and we got to see Jesus Ferreira playing for the team again, maybe these are opportunities for guys to prove that they deserve a shot in the squad, and some other guys who weren't selected were.
How are they going to prove themselves, though? How does PFOC prove himself? How does whoever prove himself at this point?
PFOC seems like he's proved himself enough to be in the conversation for a camp at a minimum, but for some reason wasn't included. Whereas, a lot of people kind of consider him potentially the starting 9. So you have to question what Greg was doing with it because the results didn't go the way that they wanted to, or at least how the fans would have wanted them to. And maybe this is me trying to do some mental gymnastics to justify it for him, but you kind of hope that he was like, well, there was a reason why I didn't bring those guys, and here's what it is. Because otherwise, how do you justify leaving out a PFOC from camp? How do you justify leaving out a Brandon Vasquez? Maybe Vasquez doesn't work, but clearly neither did Pepe this time around.
So, I mean, we've pushed a couple options have been pushed continually, it seems like, through the course of qualification and friendlies of Pepe and Jesus Ferreira. Neither have really, I mean, they've each had their moments, but neither has really owned that role.
Yeah. And
so it would have probably been nice to maybe see someone else given the opportunity, especially in matches that were friendlies that again, not to like overcook this whole thing, but like you almost kind of question why we picked those matches in that setting to be our final warm-up matches.
I mean, it certainly
so wasn't. We picked 2 World Cup sides, but why did we go to random places in Europe in empty stadiums? Like, was that? I feel like that was an interesting move.
Well, part of it is like this was a largely European-based squad, right? Like there were a couple MLS guys that were brought in for sure, but most of these guys are in Europe, and it's not infrequent that, especially when you have a tournament that's going to be played over in that part of the world, if the guys for the most part are already over there, you'll schedule a friendly against a team in a closer location so everyone won't have to travel as much. And Right now, this is a huge injury timing concern, right? Like this is something that all these guys are trying to avoid that, and longer travel times almost always increase the likelihood of injuries. And I think you're trying to minimize that for that reason. But I think the location certainly didn't help with getting results either.
I mean, it was like watching like a pandemic game. Like you just heard the echoes throughout the stadium of like, I mean, you could hear all the players talking. You could hear just nothingness for good stretches of the match. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe again, that's maybe me just overcooking it and overthinking every little thing that happened there. But I don't know. I feel like there could have been somewhat wiser decisions made across the board on personnel, location, everything for those final two matches. Hopefully, in the end, they don't matter.
Well, take rest and ease knowing that you're not the only person questioning the decisions that were made going into
I noticed
through this round of friendlies. It's definitely been a hot button topic, and I do think that it's ridiculous that some people are calling for Greg's head to roll before this World Cup. Like, guys, come on. Like you
think that's a good idea? Yeah, that
he's at least earned the chance to sail this team through the completion of the tournament.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, even if I wasn't a Greg fan, I should be wise enough to realize how disastrous it would be to cut your manager loose a month, like within 60 days of the World Cup.
Well, hey, crazier things have happened.
I mean, and then they didn't result in good things.
No, you're not wrong.
Let's fully go stateside. It is MLS decision day upon us. We just had some Wednesday night matches to get us to kind of all square, where everybody is just facing that one final match, that one final test, that one final opportunity to get the points on the board to make or not make the playoffs. We had, again, some big ones tonight that were pretty seismic out east. Two matches that meant a lot for the final couple spots in the Eastern Conference for playoffs. You had Charlotte FC and Columbus going at it. Columbus taking at one point a 2-0 lead in this match. They had a 2-1 lead into stoppage time. And what has been the case so often for this club? Your final score: Charlotte 2, Columbus 2.
I mean, the Crew are, without question, whether they make the playoffs or not, the Supporter Shield winners for crapping the bed this season in MLS. Like they took home the Shield for that.
It's wild that it's happened literally. I mean, you could almost set your watch to it at this point. So they give up a 94th minute goal in this match. On the weekend, it was actually them doing the opposite. They actually scored a winner in the 93rd minute. You thought maybe they had turned the page on that, because just before that, the match before, they draw it with a 95th minute equalizer against Portland. They play Montreal a few weeks back, where Montreal gets a win gets the equalizer in the 94th minute. Ever since they snatched that draw here in Cincinnati, they have fallen victim to a last-second goal 1, 2, and now 3 times in basically like 2 months.
It's hard getting a taste of your own medicine sometimes.
Yeah, that is, it's just wild. It's just wild that happened. So with that result, they hang in 7th place. They move up to 7th, actually, because Orlando slips out as they lose 4-1 to Inter Miami, who have all but effectively clinched a spot, as they now sit at 48 points. In 5th place, it is Cincy 46 points in 6th place. Columbus on 46 points in 7th place. And then on the outside looking in, Orlando, 45 points. Orlando and Columbus play each other. So one thing is certain is that not everyone can get max points.
Right.
Both Columbus and Orlando cannot get 3 points on the weekend. They are playing each other. Cincinnati plays DC United, who have already wrapped up the wooden spoon. That works out logistically. We can just deliver that in person, so that's nice.
Nice to get that out of town.
No, it's good. You don't have to pay for the shipping. You just bring it with you, and just leaving it there. At the opening, like Acosta should walk out with it, and there's that little there's that little pedestal where they grab the ball off of. He should just set that on there after the ref grabs the ball off of it. Just set the thing on there and just continue to walk out.
I want Wayne Rooney to come pick it up.
Wayne Rooney will be just so confused what is happening.
Like, what is this thing? I could see him breaking it out of anger and spite after he learned what he was actually taking away from Acosta. But no, it's DC is a good team to end the season on. If you wanted to pick your poison at the end of the year, like that would probably be one if you had to try to get a result. And let's just say this much: the destiny of FC Cincinnati is in their own hands. Like if they win, they're in. Like there's no.
If they draw, they're in.
I know.
They just need a result.
They just any points here will do, and they will find themselves in that situation. So they're on the cusp of it, and the situation that needs to unfold for the Crew and Orlando to advance and SCC to be left on the outside sitting in
it would be a draw. They would have to draw, and DC United would have to win.
Yes.
If they do that, Columbus would jump them in points. Orlando would be even on points, but the first tiebreaker in MLS, because why do things the normal way, isn't goal differential, it's wins.
Oh, sure.
And they have more wins already. So it would actually be Orlando jumping, getting the tiebreaker over Cincinnati if they draw. So there's a lot of possibilities. Since he could win, since he could draw, any other combination could happen, doesn't matter. They're in. Since he could lose, and as long as there's someone getting 3 points in that match, in that other match with Orlando and Columbus, they're still fine. They're still in. So Wild, things can happen still, and it is decision day coming. So maybe Wild, crazy, there's basically let me pull up here. I think 10 scenarios that can happen here.
Yeah.
There's 9 scenarios. Only one of them, again, that's the Columbus Orlando draw, DC United win. Only that combo leads to FC Cincinnati not getting in the playoffs. The other 8 all result in them getting in.
It's time to start holding your breath, Cincinnati.
I mean, dude, after Saturday and just the bad juju that you could cut with a knife in that stadium, I've never been in a stadium where you could tell that. And I felt it. I mean, I'm not immune to it. I wasn't some tourist that just sitting there laughing at everybody. It was me too. Everybody in the stadium, everybody on the field could just feel that hey, is this moment too big for us?
I mean, one of those moments where the tension is palpable and you can feel everyone in the stadium getting pulled by it.
My boss at one point looked at me and he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" I was like, yeah, just big match. He's like, you are your foot is shaking so bad right now. Your leg is just bouncing up and down in your seat there.
You're sweating profusely.
Yeah. It's 60 degrees outside.
You've pitted your shirt and jacket. What's going on? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm either having a heart attack or I'm just stressed out from this match. It's one of the two.
Yeah. It's toss up. Dude, it was really kind of grateful that this weekend's match is not a home match, because I feel like it would just be just a chance for that to repeat itself again would have just be too painful. So that's the Eastern Conference. That's what's going on there. Looking out west, first of all, congratulations, LAFC. They are your Supporter Shield's winners after they grabbed a late one in Portland over the weekend.
Yeah. Toronto's men looking quite the class of the league this year, and I would say are probably favorites at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen this story before, though, where LAFC is the toast of the town, the toughest team in the regular season, and then just can't get it done in the postseason. So will LAFC actually see it through this time? Well, we'll have to find out. Playoff wise, Dallas is in, Austin is in, LAFC is in, and so all it comes down to is Portland and Minnesota and Salt Lake. Now, technically, because they would only have 12 wins. They could, they really could. I mean, so Nashville's in, LAFC is in, Salt Lake City can sort of get in. They play Portland, so that is kind of like
that's their road in. Yeah.
The matchup, right? And if there's that match.
If there's a time to play Portland, there's a bit of chaos going on there that maybe we should save for winners and wankers.
Feel like it's going to appear there, yes.
Yeah, it probably will. But maybe this is an opportune time to catch that organization at a critical moment.
Minnesota play Vancouver, who are, I guess, technically alive.
They're mathematically alive, but they need a lot of results to go their direction for things to end up that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, they would actually they would have to beat Minnesota by like 10 goals.
Yeah, I mean, if they beat Minnesota, they could potentially leapfrog Vancouver and Salt Lake, or excuse me, they could leapfrog Salt Lake, but they also need Real Salt Lake to not pick up any points, and they I just don't. There's just a lot of things that are working against them at the moment.
Yeah, so they would need Salt Lake to lose, Portland to win that match, and then they would need to beat Minnesota by a metric ton, because they would tie on wins with 13 wins. Second tiebreaker is goal differential with at the moment Minnesota United -5, Vancouver -15. So they got a bit of a gap to make up. So it's most likely coming down to that Portland Salt Lake match. Obviously we talked about this last time, but it does. It's all finalized now. Colorado, Seattle, Sporting Kansas City. I mean, three of the three kind of mainstays in the West, as far as like teams that are generally a good shot to make the playoffs, especially Seattle, who's basically always made the playoffs. They're officially done. Their season has essentially ended, and it's ended in failure.
Yeah. It's crazy to me that Seattle won the Champions League and failed to miss the playoffs, and that's the most MLS thing imaginable.
Everyone had the the Thanos meme of like, you won the the Champions League. What did it cost you? It was like everything.
It cost me everything. It's definitely an interesting scenario for them, but. Seattle on the outside looking in, but we are going to get a good final match day to the MLS season as we head into the playoffs, and at least we have some intriguing headlines and put a few matches to watch that are worthy and not just a bunch of trash, worthless matches as we watch the final day play out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good that we actually have stuff writing. Obviously, locally, Cincinnati fans would be hoping that we weren't still playing for something, but they are. So essentially, the makeup of 3 spots in the East, 2 spots in the West, that'll all be decided on Sunday, And now, are they doing it? I got to look at this. Are they doing everybody at the same time? Or are they doing the comp? Okay, so the West plays at 5, and the East will play at 2:30 before them.
Yeah, which I think is fair.
No, that's good. So all Eastern Conference games will start at 2:30. Again, the ones to watch. Really, Orlando, Columbus is kind of the big one where you have two teams that are still in it, battling. Cincinnati result also important there. And then out west, it's really all down to Salt Lake and Portland. Winner is in, loser
sitting on the outside.
Bummer, dude.
Yeah. I think we're at the part of the show for winners and wankers.
Winners and wankers. You want to get do we want to hit wankers right now?
Yeah, we should just get it out of the way. There were a lot of ones you probably could have gone with, a bunch of disastrous kind of stuff in the world of soccer this week. Worth mentioning, what was the Indonesian stadium disaster that's kind of caught a lot of headlines outside of just the world of soccer. But
I feel like there's actually I didn't even mention that one because it's like I still feel like we don't even know what truly even happened there.
Wanker is here. But no, the one that definitely caught my attention for wanker this week is just a cornucopia of humans and organizations that were implicated in the Yates Report, which looked into the kind of abuse scandals that have unfolded in NWSL over the last couple seasons. Man, I read a bunch of this 300-page report yesterday after it came out. It is some heavy reading, and there was just a lot more people that were knee deep in this stuff than you would have ever imagined. And I think
we knew this. We saw a lot of this unfold last year, right? We saw a lot of it unfold, but so much of it we didn't fully have the picture of what's happening, and the Louisville situation was kind of the one of the big ones where it's like, okay, so they've gone ahead and moved on from this coach, but it was never really said why they were choosing to do that.
Well, the Louisville
it was just kind of assumed, right?
Yeah, it was all of the other coaches were like going down in flames at that point.
And Louisville was like, and also us.
Jump in on this too, like, let's get them out, like right now. And then it was like hush hush, and nothing was really said about.
Hey, on a completely unrelated note, we are also letting go of our manager, and we're not telling you why.
It just seemed like a trend that we wanted to get on board, those new memes.
But it was half. It was half the managers. There's 10 teams. It was 5 of them that got let go over the course of last year.
And rightfully so. An organizational kind of, investigation was necessary to kind of look into why, half the teams in the league were dispatching their coaches for potential abuse allegations, both sexual and physical, and less so physical, but certainly verbal. And man, the Louisville one is just it's disgusting to hear about how awful former coach Christy Holly was, and some of the truly terrible things that he was doing to some of the women that were playing under his care, and it just being ignored organizationally by a man like James O'Connor, who's very familiar to those in the USL circles.
Former head coach, now the president of the club or the organization,
at least of their sporting sides, and
right.
Both he and higher ups were aware of some of these things, and certainly have swept it under the rug and absolved themselves of any responsibility. But the group that's catching the most heat at the moment is the Portland outfit with the Thorns, and this is all related to the firing of Coach Paul Riley, who they then helped get another gig, and really didn't announce why he was let go from the job in the first place. And it seems now that a couple heads have finally rolled out there. Gavin Wilkinson, who's been the GM, kind of working behind the scenes in Portland for both the Thorns and the Timbers, and president of business Mike Golub. Both of them were canned from not just the Thorns gig, but their MLS jobs as well. So it's just and calls are coming too for Merritt Paulson to sell his stake in the side as well. So Here's my concern with the Yates Report. Lots of people to point your finger at and be like, what the hell? Tons of wankers unveiled this week. But what I'm really worried about is this just being like another footnote, and will true change come about from this report? I'm not as confident in that as I am as seeing at least a couple of heads roll because of it. Like, yeah, people will leave and they'll pay a little bit of a price for it, but
sure,
will those cultures actually change? And I think that's where a lot of the work needs to be done.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's kind of a parallel issue, parallel story, parallel investigation and findings happening in Canada and in the hockey world, where Hockey Canada, which is like the governing body that kind of runs the national teams, but also just kind of like how USSF and soccer, like, basically is the one that's shepherding along everything from like a youth development level all the way up into the professional levels.
Right.
And Hockey Canada has basically had to be called to account for what seems to be every month or so a new allegation of a sexual assault or rape that had happened with Hockey Canada players. Generally, so far it's been mainly at like the World Juniors level, so like the 17, 18, 19-year-old level.
Right.
And a lot of it's just the talk is about the how do we move on from this whole like this structure within the organization that was literally had these built out slush funds that were for the sole purpose of paying off these situations and paying people off and settling lawsuits. And this is money that's coming from like someone's like 8-year-old kid signing up for youth hockey in their town. And so the big discussion was like right now in front of Parliament there in Canada and kind of playing out in the media is like how do you not see any change happening if you don't clean house?
Right.
And I feel like that's the same thing here is, okay, this person can be let go because they were super direct and that person we let go, but there's so many other people that were around and have been around and are still around that are part of the culture and the ethos that had allowed this to go on for years and years. And sadly, we know we're probably just scratching the surface, because the real scary thing is most of these guys that have been fired as head coaches in the NWSL have been coaches that have made their way all the way up from youth ranks. And there's a concern as far as like how long have they been doing and operating in this manner.
No, and it's like you said a minute ago, like it scratched the surface. Like we just saw that report recently from The Guardian that looked at the University of Toledo's former head coach, who was given a nice cushy job running development for Ohio soccer.
Yeah.
He gets canned for sexual harassment allegations, which were hushed down. And then he lands a gig running development, which exposes him to tons of the type of women he was abusing in his former role. It's everywhere. Like it's in a club, it's likely happening. And, we're getting the attention on this because these are the upper echelons where there's money at stake, and people are finally like, hey, it's the risk assessment here is like, we may not earn our investment back if we don't look into this better. That same thing, that calculus isn't happening at the lower levels where it's far more likely to be taking place. So, these organizations are like the bellwethers for like how things should be changing. But, the culture change that needs to happen doesn't need to just happen with them. It needs to happen in all these different places. And where we start punishing enablers who stood by and allowed these types of things to transpire. And there are some really, but like there are hardly no people involved in U.S. soccer that haven't enabled this in some way or capacity. And it's hard to dole out who has that much culpability in it and who should pay a price. But they're just, I agree. Like there's just a lot of cleaning house that needs to happen for people who've really enabled and excused this type of behavior for so long.
I mean, the NWSL has done well in that they have made the leagues stay around.
Yeah.
Where previous women's pro leagues have not lasted very long, and there was a lot of volatility as far as just the amount of teams and ownership and like literally players getting paychecks and stuff like that. But none of that is not worth saving if this is what's also being preserved. So it's like, yeah, has this league done well as far as growing the game? Sure. Does it still deserve to possibly be blown up because you have to just absolutely clean house to fix the really troubling problems that seem to be rampant? Yeah, maybe that's what needs to happen here.
Well, how far down the food chain do we start blowing things up to start
goodness,
the legs out of this stuff? But
sure.
Collateral damage surely to happen regardless of what unfolds. So let's move on to brighter things, unless you had a different wanker you wanted to highlight.
Nope, that was mine.
All right. Give me your winner then this week.
My winner is just kind of a slightly broader one, but also specifically wanted to point out just locally here, Tommy G, Kevin McCluskey, like just the guys that have been doing the local broadcast here since day one for this club, back to the USL days, early USL days. They obviously did their final home broadcast, as everything will be switching over to a in-house model under the new Apple Plus TV right deal, where you won't have the local broadcasters in every single city doing every single individual home broadcast. So just, I think it's magnified in Cincinnati, because you look at when this club first started, to have in day one, match number one, a broadcast that was accessible, was well done, was furnished just as well as a Cincinnati Reds broadcast. For a USL side in day one, that means a lot, and that goes a long way into being relevant and being in the minds of people in the city, and helps grow that brand. And the fact that they did that since day one shouldn't be lost on people, like how good we had it. I mean, there was a lot of other USL clubs that had some pretty rinky-dink, borderline public access broadcasts, and we can say that as people who have done public access soccer broadcasts.
100%. I feel like our standard was probably better than some of the USL standards that were out there.
Yeah, I mean, there was some brutal ones, and you could tell that it definitely did not help sustain relevancy, grow relevancy. Legitimacy was not helped by bad broadcasts in other markets in the USL. And for Tommy and the gang to put on a top class broadcast since day one means a lot. So my winner is them, and really to a larger extent though, all of the MLS broadcasters. Some of them have been doing it since day one of MLS.
Oh man,
that are having to hang it up. You got JP Dellacamera was Philly's guy from day one when Philly came around. What was that, 2012?
Yep.
You have a lot of that. You have a lot of guys that have been a staple in this organization and a staple in this league that has had to fight for relevancy and had to, the early days of MLS were not pretty glamorous, and these guys were there carrying the torch. So just kind of a cheers to all of them as they, some of them did it this week, some of them will do it this Sunday, have their final broadcast, their final home broadcast, their final travel everything that goes into doing a broadcast that one last time as MLS kind of takes a new path going forward. So hats off to them.
Yeah, definitely sad to see so many broadcasters kind of hanging it up, and a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to be in the future. There is the option, and I remember this from the Apple Plus announcement, that you'll have the ability to switch to a local radio stream instead of hearing the in-house MLS broadcast, if that's something that you're interested in doing. So, maybe there's still a window open for Tommy and Kevin potentially to come back and do some commentary. But there's still no answers on that for a lot of people. But it's, Brian Dunseth, who's been out in Salt Lake for such a long time. People like Joe Tutino, who's been with the LA Galaxy for eons. It's sad to see a lot of those names go, and they've all done a very admirable job over the years to bring, top notch commentary and coverage to a sport that we love, and to kind of raise the bar for what could be expected. And hopefully we see some of these guys repurposed in the new Apple Plus deal as well.
Yeah, we'll have to see how all that is going forward. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see these broadcasts, what that feels like. I know USL has kind of moved to that model to an extent to kind of make up for the less than broadcasts that existed across the league, doing a lot of in-house stuff to kind of bring things up to a level. And while it's a good broadcast and there's some quality control there, yeah, I think something. I don't know. I feel like something is missing without having, when you don't have your local guy. But we'll see what happens with the radio options and just kind of how, if someone like, Alex Steck is still going to hang around with the club. She'll be doing content, but it'll just be content that's on, the website and social media and stuff like that.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I think is that all we got?
I've got my quick winner that we'll shoot.
Oh, yeah. Did you want to do yours?
Yeah, we'll just squeeze it in here. Mine's a pretty simple one. Obviously, Qatar have been in the news a bunch with the World Cup rapidly approaching, and lots of people calling for boycotts, and whether you're going to do it or not is totally up to you. And I'm not going to judge you one way or the other. But I do like what Denmark are doing ahead of this World Cup and how they're really going to show some form of protest, along with native in-house brand Hummel. They are putting out a protest kit for the Qatar World Cup that completely lacks any identifiable marks on it. So their traditional red kit will feature none of the traditional Hummel marks on it. That they'll still be on there, and there'll still be those red chevrons on the shoulders, but they're going to be red just like the jersey will be. And Denmark's patch will also be that way on the kit as well. And I believe, if memory serves me right, the whites are going to be the same way. So it's just like a silent form of protest where they're saying, hey, we still have an obligation contractually to one another to do this, but we don't want our image associated with what's going down in the Qatar World Cup outside of our players are there to play and perform to the best of their abilities. So just kind of a cool way of approaching the protest. And it's already pissed off the Qatari Supreme Committee directing the World Cup, directing some ire in Denmark's direction. FIFA's not going to be really do much about it, but I just love the idea of those little kind of digs that will be visible during the World Cup, and there's not a damn thing that Qatar can do to censor it out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see with the some of the more subtle and silent protests that will happen throughout the World Cup, and obviously how the hosts will attempt to stifle that.
Like a bunch of the captains have all gotten together and agreed to wear rainbow armbands to support LGBTQ, and that's something that is very frowned upon in Qatar. So yeah, let's see more of these, and I enjoy the creativity from the national teams and players to execute that under tight circumstances. So that gets us to the end of this week's show. If you want
we're there.
Of either one of us to extend the show in any capacity, please do. Jeremy's at Jeremy Lance on Twitter. I'm at Wrong Side of Pond. Until we gather again next week, digitally or in person. We'll talk to you soon.
Later.